Ha! How did it go again? I was hesitant to answer Emily's inquiry. She said something. Your grandmother will surely get better if you keep smiling. My eyes got big. I believe I may have stated something along those lines. Emily gave a small smile before beginning to go through her purse. Didn't you give this to that kid? I was really taken aback by what Emily was holding. Kevin is my name. As of right now, I am 30 years old and working as a nurse in a small clinic in a small rural town. The nurse is in her 50s and the doctor is in his 60s. After years of working together, they asked to have a nurse called in to assist them when their physical condition deteriorated. This is how I got here. When I arrived, they were both so delighted that they departed right away for a house call. Since everyone in this town is aware of the doctor's house call hours, they reasoned that even in the event of an emergency, they wouldn't worry if a young person like myself was present to keep an eye on things. To be honest, I felt a little overpowered. Being left in charge was nerve-wracking since, despite the instructions I had received in the morning, I still didn't know where anything was. I made the decision to begin becoming acquainted with the space by looking over every shelf and making notes. They informed me that unless there is an emergency, nobody generally shows up during the doctor's house call hours. But then they said, "Pardon me, I need your help. There is an urgent situation." Don't emergencies often occur when you least expect them to? A young mother was clutching a small boy who was gasping for air when I made my way to the entryway. Oh, I apologize. At the moment, Dr. Watson is on a house call. The woman said, "I know that, but look at him," before I could say anything more. He's hurting so much. Do something, please. Since you're wearing a uniform, you must also work in the medical sector, correct? Her shrill, frantic remarks flustered me a little. Ah, okay. Please come this way. In the examining room, I guided the youngster to a chair. He had a serious injury to his knee, as I could see by looking at him. On his way home from school, he fell. Please assist him right away. I became even more nervous when I heard the desperation in her voice. I had just looked to see where the bandages were, but I couldn't remember where they were. What are you doing? Be quick. Her eyes were about to well up. Watching the youngster groan in agony must have been too much for her. My worry increased as her voice grew more urgent. I'm sorry, could you please wait in the waiting room for a moment? The woman seems perplexed. It's just that your anxiety might rub off on him. I said, I'm sorry, and after comforting the boy, she grudgingly left. Everything will work out. It may hurt a little, but have courage, will you? I was able to gather myself after she went and used water to clean the boy's injuries. I thoroughly examined the cut for any sand or dirt. Despite his pained grimace, the kid remained resilient. Well done. All right, I'll take out the small stones now. As I carefully used tweezers to remove the stones and sand without causing further pain, I told him everything. Dr. Watson came back as I was working on this. From the waiting area, I could hear him talking to the woman. She seems to have relaxed somewhat. I completed treating the wounds, gave the youngster to Dr. Watson, and then went to the waiting area to give the mom an update. I've cleaned his wound of the sand and stones. The remainder will be handled by Dr. Watson. The woman bent her head as I stated that. I apologize. I became agitated. I appreciate your assistance. Please look after him. She spoke in a courteous manner, but it was obvious that she didn't trust me. On my first day, she most likely believed I was an inept nurse. I noticed that I was a little depressed. I learned more about the woman from one of the nurses, Natalie. Emily was her name. It seems that she had only begun teaching in the neighborhood elementary school a year prior. She is intelligent, vivacious, and gives it her all. Even though she is only 24, she is already a well-liked teacher. But sometimes she offers too much. Because of the way she pressured me on my first day, my initial impression of her wasn't great. I found myself hoping that she and those around her would stay healthy. I didn't want to see her too often at the clinic because of illness or injury. I guess that's how uneasy I felt around her at first. But then a month passed. I encountered her many times. Sometimes She would knock on the door before the clinic even opened, carrying an elderly person who had fallen ill on the street. Other times, while I was heading home after work, she'd be crawling on the ground, looking for something someone had dropped. Stop. She seems to be the type who just can't leave people in trouble. Just like Natalie said, she was always giving it her all. Because of that, she sometimes got a bit too intense. When she brought in the elderly person, she begged. They said he's anemic. Please hurry, do something. And when she was looking for the lost item, she dragged me in by saying, "Oh, Kev, perfect timing. Help me look for it." That day, I had planned to go home early and watch a TV show I was looking forward to. But I couldn't turn her down and ended up helping. I'm also not the type to leave people in need. I still vividly remember the sense of relief when we found the lost item and the sight of Emily's radiant smile, as if she was celebrating her own success. That smile has stayed in my mind ever since. Though my first impression of her wasn't the best, I couldn't stop thinking about that smile. I tried not to dwell on it too much. Then one day, during these routine encounters, Dr. Watson asked me to deliver some medicine to a patient, so I was walking through the town. It wasn't far, but driving there would have required navigating some narrow roads, so I decided to go on foot. It was a sunny break during the rainy season, and the air was a bit humid. As I walked, I started feeling a bit flushed. Just then, I heard a loud shout, which startled me. Looking toward the sound, I saw the local elementary school ahead. The elementary school, huh? I wonder if Emily's there. With that thought in mind, I glanced over at the school grounds, where I saw the children lining up. As I kept walking, I realized it was some sort of group activity class. The PE teacher was loudly giving instructions. There were kids of all sizes, so it seemed like a whole school practice. This town doesn't have many children. I'd heard each grade only has a few students. As I kept watching, I spotted Emily standing there, rigid in her tracksuit. She looked incredibly tense. PE teachers always have such loud voices, and some of them can be pretty intimidating. At first, I was just thinking casually, but then a strange sense of unease crept in, and I stopped in my tracks. The PE teacher's voice was getting more and more frustrated, probably because the children weren't moving in sync. Then, in the next moment, I pushed off the ground and started running. At the same time, I heard a scream as the crowd started to stir. I'd arrived at the school grounds, and then one by one, the children began collapsing. I shouted at the top of my lungs, "It's heat stroke. Move the kids into the shade. Anyone who can, give them water. Fan them with anything you've got." At my words, Emily muttered hesitantly, "But should we really move them? Should we wait for Dr. Watson to arrive?" I shouted back, "Cooling their bodies down is the priority. I'm a nurse, trust me." Emily's immediate reply, "Yes," echoed, and the other teachers also sprang into action. I quickly called the clinic to ask Dr. Watson to bring any necessary supplies and rush over just in case. I also arranged for an ambulance. Meanwhile, the staff brought thermometers, ice pillows, and water from the infirmary. I went around checking the children, prioritizing the ones who needed help the most. I checked if they could say their names or drink water. For those who were half-conscious or whose hands were shaking too much to drink, I left notes with symbols on them to indicate their condition. Seeing that the teachers, including Emily, were flustered, I gave them instructions. Kids without a note are in relatively better condition. Cool their armpits and necks, and have them drink water slowly. The teachers, now a little calmer, quickly followed my instructions. Emily, too, was trying her best, encouraging the children, "Hang in there. It's going to be okay." At that moment, Dr. Watson arrived in a hurry. "Dr. Watson, I've marked the kids in the order of urgency," I said. Just from that, Dr. Watson understood what I meant. He rushed to the side of a child with trembling hands and began giving precise instructions. After assessing the situation, he directed that the child be moved indoors for IV treatment. Dr. Watson took care of the children with the highest priority. Feeling a bit more at ease, I began checking on the kids who could drink water. As I slowly gave them the oral rehydration solution that Natalie had brought, their symptoms gradually started to improve. Thankfully, none of the kids needed to be taken by ambulance. The paramedics explained that my quick response had made all the difference. The PE teacher, however, seemed confused by the unexpected situation. "It's only June, and all the adults were fine," he muttered in disbelief, which left me a bit frustrated. In this season, the body isn't yet accustomed to the heat. More people rely on air conditioning, which weakens the body's ability to sweat. And today, because of yesterday's rain, the humidity was high, making it harder for the body to cool down. Kids, being shorter, are more affected by heat radiating from the ground. Outdoor activities without proper breaks are out of the question. My slightly firm tone made the PE teacher clear his throat awkwardly. All the other teachers were listening to me as well. Dr. Watson nodded in agreement, which seemed to add weight to my explanation. As we left the scene, I hoped they would be more careful in the future and avoid pushing the children too hard. After my shift finally ended, I began my tired walk home. Then, I heard a voice from behind. "Ah." I turned around. Emily was standing there. "Hi," she greeted me casually. "Are you on your way home?" I greeted her casually in return. She bowed to me. Thank you so much for today." I smiled back at her. "It's my job. I'm just glad everyone's okay." "You too. It must have been tough for you, right?" When I pointed this out, Emily looked surprised. "Actually, when I passed by the school earlier, I noticed you seemed troubled." I had a bad feeling. Even though she's usually so cheerful, she seemed drained. It looked like she was trying to hold something back. And then the children collapsed before she did. The kids had reached their limit first. You could tell from my expression. "That's impressive. Would you like to grab a bite to eat if you're free?" To be honest, I was exhausted. I really just wanted to go home. But this was an invitation from a woman I had started to feel a little intrigued by, so I couldn't turn her down. We walked into a small restaurant nearby. There were other places if we kept walking, but we both agreed we didn't feel like walking anymore. Since it was still early, there weren't any other customers, and we were seated in a private booth in the back. Looking at the menu, I saw they didn't just have typical diner food, but also some meal options, so I ordered the meatloaf plate. "When you're tired, comfort food like this really hits the spot," I said while eating. Emily looked at me, wide-eyed. Really, I should have ordered the meatloaf too. There was something about the way she listened to me so earnestly that made her seem a little cute. "You were like a completely different person today, Kevin." I gave a small, sheepish smile. "Does that mean you want to say that my usual self isn't great?" I asked, half joking. She tilted her head thoughtfully. "My first impression was you seemed a bit unreliable," she admitted. Her words made me slump a little. That day, it was my first day on the job. I didn't know where anything was. Dr. Watson wasn't there, and you were rushing me. I was seriously panicking. I explained, making my case, and Emily shrugged apologetically. "I'm sorry. That boy's injury looked so painful, and I panicked too." She had run to the clinic with the boy in her arms, only to find me, the nurse, flustered. It wasn't surprising she found me unreliable. But my first impression of her wasn't that great either, so I guess we were even. But recently, I've started to think you're actually really kind. You helped me look for that lost item, and today, my impression of you completely changed. You handled everything so efficiently, giving us clear instructions, prioritizing the kids, and you even told off that scary Mr. Thompson. Kevin, who are you? I chuckled softly. I'm just a regular nurse. Though if there's something that sets me apart, I do have experience as a disaster relief nurse. Emily's eyes widened again. Disaster relief? I nodded. Yeah, I've always wanted to be involved in emergency medicine, so while I was working at a large hospital, I expressed my desire to become a disaster relief nurse. I wanted to save as many lives as possible. That desire is what led me to become a nurse, to save even more lives. I became interested in emergency care, and the sight of disaster relief nurses working in disaster areas had inspired me deeply. After graduating from university, I worked at a DMAT-designated hospital for 5 years. I worked relentlessly, and the hospital recognized my efforts and selected me. I underwent the necessary training and exams and was eventually deployed to a disaster area as a relief nurse. It was the field I had admired for so long, but it was incredibly tough. Every second counted, and my decisions could mean the difference between life and death. The tension and sense of responsibility were overwhelming. There was no time to comfort the anxious survivors. I was constantly forced to make difficult choices, but back then, I wanted to protect everyone, and I got scolded a lot for it. Emily softly murmured, "What did they scold you for?" I groaned a little, thinking. Well, for example, scrapes and cuts are low priority medically, but they still hurt, right? I knew they should be dealt with later, but I'd hand out Band-Aids or I'd comfort a little girl who looked like she was about to cry because her relative was in bad shape. Emily leaned in, clearly interested. What did you say to her? I furrowed my brow, trying to remember. How did it go again? As I hesitated, Emily spoke up. You told her, "Your grandmother will surely get better if you keep smiling." My eyes widened in surprise. I think I might have said something like that. Emily smiled faintly, then reached into her bag and pulled something out. Didn't you give this to that girl? In her hand was a small paper crane, carefully folded from washi paper. What? Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. The girl you spoke to, that was me. My parents were missing, and it was just my grandmother and me, both of us shaking in the cold. My grandmother's health had taken a turn, and I asked for help, but her condition wasn't severe enough to warrant immediate attention. All they told me was to keep her warm. I felt so lost, and that's when you spoke to me. A memory of a trembling, desperate little girl flashed in my mind. No way, it can't be. Emily gazed lovingly at the crane in her hand. That paper crane was the one my grandmother had folded for me when I was deployed as a disaster relief nurse. She had entrusted it to me, wishing for my safety. But I felt that the little girl needed it more than I did, so I gave it to her. I saw you getting scolded after you talked to me, too. I scratched my head, feeling a bit awkward. If I prioritized things wrong, lives that could have been saved would be lost. That's what I was taught, and from that point on, I focused solely on the lives right in front of me. As a disaster relief nurse, you might think you didn't do well, but to me, you were an unforgettable hero, even though I didn't realize it until now. Emily said with teary eyes, offering a small smile. It's not surprising you didn't recognize me. It was only for a moment, and I was wearing a mask the whole time. Emily gave me a deep bow. You were the one who comforted me in such a dark time, and I treated you so poorly at the clinic. I'm so sorry. I couldn't help but laugh. I think you're apologizing for the wrong thing. I made a light-hearted joke. Emily laughed, too. Because back then, you really did seem unreliable. I'm really sorry. As Emily apologized like a child making excuses, I found her utterly adorable. From that moment on, we quickly grew closer. The day we talked at the restaurant, we exchanged personal contact information. Every time I pass by the elementary school, I feel a little flutter of excitement. I find myself looking around, wondering if she might be there, even though I knew she was too focused on her work to text during the day. I couldn't help but check my phone constantly. I had completely fallen for her. Wanting to see her, I worked up the courage to ask her out for a meal. I nervously waited for her reply, and when it came, it was a yes. I thought it might be the perfect opportunity to confess my feelings, but then, it's been so hot lately, hasn't it? Oh hey, how about we go to the river sometime, maybe next week? She suggested, and my excitement deflated immediately. I can't swim. I didn't want to admit something so uncool, but it was the truth. Really? That's surprising. I scratched my head again, feeling a bit embarrassed. Yeah, so maybe we could do something else. Before I could finish, Emily leaned in eagerly. I'll teach you. I was stunned. Oh, what? I never expected her to respond like that. Completely unaware of my awkwardness, Emily's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. I'm a really good teacher. I took swimming lessons for years. There's this great spot upstream from here where you can swim. The water's super cold and refreshing. It's settled then, and just like that, the plan was made without much of my input. I honestly can't remember much of the conversation after that. All I could think about was the dread of showing her my embarrassing inability to swim, and any thoughts of confessing my feelings were completely overshadowed by that. Still, I couldn't deny there was a part of me that was looking forward to it. I bet she'll look adorable in a swimsuit. Sitting alone in my apartment, I muttered to myself, even though there was no one around. My face turned bright red. And then the next week arrived. Okay, let's start swimming. Seeing her, I couldn't help but feel a little, just a tiny bit, disappointed. Her swimsuit was a black full-coverage training suit that went from her neck to her knees. She was fully committed to teaching me how to swim. Without warning, she took what I had been holding, the inflatable ring I had been clutching, and promptly tossed it far into the distance. You'll be fine. Humans float, you know. I wanted to complain, I can't swim because I don't float, but I kept quiet and followed her lead. Taking a deep breath, I cautiously dipped my feet into the river. Wow, it's cold. Right? Feels great, doesn't it? Lately, the heat had been unbearable. Even now, the sun was shining down brightly on us, but as soon as my feet touched the water, I felt the refreshing chill. That area is deeper, so let's start in the shallow part to get used to the water. Reluctantly, I waded deeper into the river. Though it had been scorching hot just moments ago, the water was so cold that it sent shivers through me. Wow, that's chilly. I shuddered. Yeah, maybe it's still a bit early for swimming. And look, there's no one else here. Emily voiced what I had been trying not to think about. We were completely alone. Last summer, this place was packed with local kids. It was a Sunday, just at the start of July. Maybe people weren't in the mood for swimming yet. Since no one's here, we can practice as much as we want. Okay, let's start with kicking. Grab my hands. It seemed we were really going to practice swimming. Not considering how holding her hands would make my heart race, Emily smiled at me, completely oblivious. Just as I resigned myself to learning how to swim, I heard a faint cry. I turned around instinctively. What's wrong? Emily's voice was puzzled by my sudden action. I think I heard a cat mewing. I started to explain, but Emily suddenly shouted, Look over there. She pointed downstream to a spot further along the river. On a rock in the middle of the river stood a small, trembling cat. We have to save it. Without hesitation, Emily was about to swim toward the cat. I barely managed to grab her arm. What are you doing? Let go of me. She tried to shake me off, but I held on tightly. Isn't it deeper over there? It's dangerous. Emily shot me a sharp look. I can swim just fine. If we don't hurry, it'll get swept away. I shook my head vigorously. The current could pick up suddenly. Don't be reckless. Here, this way. I held on to Emily's hand as I walked toward the shore, ignoring her protests. Here, at least use this. I handed her the inflatable ring she had taken from me earlier, then pulled a rope from my bag. You brought a rope? Emily asked, surprised. Well, I can't swim, so I came prepared with everything I might need in case something happens. I said it as I tied the rope securely to the inflatable ring. The little cat was still trembling on the rock in the middle of the river. All right, I'm counting on you, I said. Emily pressed her lips together in determination and swam out toward the kitten. A few minutes later, Emily, the kitten, and I celebrated our safe return on the riverbank. I let out a deep sigh. Emily, you're way too reckless. At my exasperated tone, Emily looked down slightly, but she pouted. I raised my eyebrows in concern. What would you have done if something had happened? I asked. Emily glanced at me. If something happens, I know you'll take care of it, Kevin. That was unfair. Well, I guess that means I'll have to always stay by your side and watch over you, huh? At my words, Emily's eyes widened and her cheeks flushed. What does that mean? I looked straight at her. When you swam out to save that cat, your back looked so small, and I couldn't stop worrying. What if you didn't come back? That thought crossed my mind. So I decided if you came back safely, I'd confess. Emily's face was bright red. I was probably just as red. I want to always stay by your side and look after you. Is that okay? Emily smiled warmly. Yes. I might make you shake your head in disbelief over and over, but I'd love for you to stay by my side and watch over me. I nodded with a huge smile. A few years have passed since then. Sorry to keep you waiting. Emily came running toward me, waiting at the school gate. Hey, how was your day? I asked. Let me carry that for you, I said, offering my hand. You don't need to. It's fine, she replied, though the tote bag she handed me was much heavier than fine. Wow, lots of books today, I commented as I slung the bag over my shoulder. Emily laughed. Yeah, I'm helping a student who's struggling with a section, so I borrowed a bunch of reference books from a senior teacher. She seemed to be struggling with how to teach the material. Just as I was thinking how kind and dedicated she still is, Emily suddenly broke into a jog. Hey, don't run. It's dangerous. Ahead of her was an elderly woman. You look like you're carrying something heavy. Let me help you, Emily offered. I quickly caught up to them and gently took the bag from Emily before she could grab it. Nope, I've got this. Emily frowned. But I could have carried it just fine. I glanced down at Emily's belly. Don't forget that you're pregnant. This is exactly why I can't take my eyes off you. In exasperation, the elderly woman smiled and said, You got such a kind husband. No, it's Emily who's the kind one. I replied with a wry smile, carrying the bags in both hands as we started walking. When we arrived at the woman's house, she invited us in for tea, but I said we should get home. Max is probably feeling lonely. Emily smiled and nodded. You're right. We'll come visit again soon. Emily waved with a cheerful smile. Knowing her, we really would visit again. The cat we rescued from the river that day had stuck to Emily ever since, so we named him Max, and he became her beloved pet. Now here we are. Emily and I got married, and Max is part of our family. In just a few months, we'll be welcoming another new member to the family. Since I'm always worried about Emily and her tendency to take risks, I've made it a habit to pick her up after work. Thank you for always watching over me, Emily says, expressing her gratitude as always. I promise to keep an eye on you, I replied, offering my hand. Emily gently squeezed it. I hope we can keep walking hand in hand like this forever. With that thought in mind, we slowly started walking home, where Max was waiting for us.